Every night, just after sunset, the dog returned to the same spot, a patch of dirt near the edge of the woods, where no flowers grew and the ground never settled. He didn't bark, he didn't howl, he just dug. Locals said he was just an old stray, but 6-year-old Millie knew better. Because the night she followed him, she found something no one was ever meant to find. Welcome to Saved by Tales. Before we begin this unforgettable journey of loyalty, secrets and redemption, tell me, do you believe dogs can sense things we can't? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe some truths deserve to be unearthed, like this video, share it with someone who loves animals, and subscribe for more stories that honor silent heroes on 4 legs. The sun sank behind the tree line, casting the town of Elmridge in soft orange hues. In this quiet village tucked between whispering pines and weathered farmhouses, time felt slower, older, as if it clung to memories that others had long forgotten. And just beyond the last picket fence, at the edge where forest swallowed field, something stirred beneath the silence. Every evening, just as the sky dimmed and the fireflies blinked awake, the dog returned. No one knew where he came from, no one knew his name, but the townsfolk called him Gravehound. He was a German shepherd, older than most, with grizzled black and tan fur and a limp that never healed. His left ear was notched, as if time or conflict had taken its toll. He never barked, never chased cars or wandered into backyards. He simply came to the same patch of earth, just beyond the pine roots, and dug, always at dusk, always alone. At first people thought he was burying something, a bone maybe, or a bit of food he scavenged, but he never stayed long. He'd dig for a few minutes, sniff the ground, then lie beside it, watching, waiting, and when the moon rose, he'd disappear back into the trees. It became folklore. Old Mrs. Talbot, who lived nearest to the woods, said the dog was cursed, that he'd once been owned by a wicked man, and now searched for justice. Teenagers made dares to follow him, only to lose their nerve once he stepped into the thick, dark forest where cell signals died and the path vanished. Some said he was guarding buried treasure, others whispered that he was digging for someone long forgotten. But none of them had followed him far enough, except Millie. 6-year-old Millie Granger wasn't the kind of child most would notice. She didn't speak often, though she understood more than people gave her credit for. With wide hazel eyes and tangled auburn hair that never stayed in its braids, Millie lived in a world just slightly offbeat from everyone else's. Where others saw trees, she saw faces. Where others heard wind, she heard secrets. And she noticed things, especially things others ignored, like the dog. She first saw him from the kitchen window of her grandmother's cottage. Her parents had left her there for a few weeks while they sorted grown-up things in the city. Grandma Etta was kind but forgetful, often distracted by puzzles and the old radio that played songs from decades past. So Millie had plenty of time to wander the yard, to climb trees barefoot, to listen. One evening, as she watched the golden light fade through the ivy-wrapped glass, she saw him. The dog, silent, still, digging. She pressed her nose to the window pane. He wasn't just digging randomly, no, there was purpose in his movement, like he knew exactly where to go, exactly how deep. And when he paused to rest beside the shallow hole, Millie noticed something else. He was crying, not with sound, but with his eyes. They looked full, heavy, as if they carried something far too large for any creature to bear. The next night, she returned to the window. He was there again, and the next night, and the next, until curiosity pulled her outside. She waited until Grandma Etta was deep in her crossword, the lamp flickering beside her. Then Millie slipped on her boots, grabbed her flashlight, and tiptoed across the creaking porch steps into the cooling dusk. The air smelled of pine needles and old earth. She didn't have to search. He was there, digging. Closer now, Millie saw details she hadn't noticed before. The bandage on his right front leg, faded and frayed. A collar, buried beneath thick fur, no tag. His fur looked coarse, unwashed, but not wild. He had once been someone's, that much she could tell. She crouched 10 feet away. "I won't hurt you," she whispered. The dog froze, turned his head. For a moment, their eyes locked. Millie didn't blink. The dog took a step toward her, then another, and then he stopped, sat down. She crawled closer, inch by inch, until she was within reach. She didn't touch him. "Not yet. What are you digging for?" she asked. Barely more than a breath. He looked at the hole, then back at her, and then he stood and walked into the woods. Millie's heart pounded. The forest was dark, deeper than any place she'd ever gone, but something pulled her forward, something unspoken. She followed. The trees closed in around her. The flashlight beam wobbled, shadows danced, branches scratched her arms, brambles tugged her coat. But the dog stayed ahead, always within sight. After what felt like forever, he stopped. They stood in a small clearing. Moonlight spilled through the canopy in broken streaks, and in the center of the clearing, the earth was disturbed. Fresh dirt, turned over, uneven. The dog pawed at it once, then sat. Millie stepped forward. She knelt and pressed her hand to the ground. Cold, damp. She looked at the dog. "Did you bury something here?" The dog let out a low, almost imperceptible whine. Then she saw it, just at the edge of the mound, something white, no bigger than a thimble. She brushed dirt away. It was a bone, small, smooth, not animal. Millie gasped. She backed away, but the dog didn't move. He looked at her, gaze heavy and unreadable. And in that moment, Millie understood. This wasn't just a dog looking for something. This was a dog mourning something, someone. She looked at the disturbed earth, then back toward home. She should run, tell someone. But who would believe her? Who would believe a child found a grave because a dog showed her? That night, Millie couldn't sleep. Her dreams were a blur of fur and moonlight, of bones and whispers. When she woke, she ran to the library. The town archive room was dusty, ignored. But Millie had time. She searched for stories, missing people, unsolved mysteries, and she found it. Abigail Rose Hewitt, age 9, disappeared in 2011. Last seen walking home from school, case cold. Millie's breath caught. She did the math. 9 years ago, the same patch of woods. The photo showed a girl with pigtails and a crooked smile. Underneath the article was another photo, a German shepherd. Her dog, his name was Major, a K9 dog in training, reported missing days after Abigail vanished. They were together, somehow. Millie stared at the screen, hands shaking. Major had waited, all this time, digging, remembering, telling the truth, the only way he could. Millie's world tilted. She reread the article 3 more times, just to be sure. But the words stayed the same. Abigail Rose Hewitt, missing. Last seen walking home from Pine Grove Elementary. Her house had been less than 3 blocks from Grandma Etta's cottage. She was 9. Millie was 6. And the dog, Major, Abigail's own. The photo was grainy, but unmistakable. The notched ear, the strong build, the dark saddle across his back. That was the same dog digging at dusk. No doubt about it. Major hadn't vanished. He had stayed, and he had waited. Millie leaned back in the wooden chair, her legs too short to touch the floor. The library's archive room smelled like must and ink, and something old. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She looked at the printed photo she'd made of the article, her fingers smudging the ink at the edges. It all felt too big for her small hands. What was she supposed to do with this? Find Abigail, she whispered. The words escaped before she could think. That night, Millie packed a backpack. She didn't tell Grandma Etta. Grown-ups never listened. They smiled too much, patted heads, said how sweet, and what an imagination. But Millie knew what she saw, what she touched, what she'd uncovered with her own fingers. Major had shown her something true, and she wasn't about to let it disappear again. She filled the bag with a flashlight, some crackers, a notepad, and her pink raincoat. Not because it was raining, but because it had big pockets. And Millie liked pockets. At exactly 7:43 p.m., she slipped outside. The dusk air was cooler than usual, laced with petrichor and pine. She crept past the rose bushes, across the gravel driveway, and through the back fence, where a loose plank let her squeeze through like a cat. Major was already there, digging. His paw strokes were slower tonight, less frantic, like he was waiting. Millie stood still until he looked up. Then she stepped forward. "You remember her, don't you?" she said. Major blinked once. His ears twitched. "Abigail." He stood, turned, and once again without a sound, he walked into the woods. Millie followed. The path this time was longer, not the same as before. The trees seemed to lean closer, the air thicker, pressing secrets into her skin. Major moved slower, letting her keep up, but his posture was rigid, purposeful. They stopped at the same clearing, but he didn't lead her to the mound this time. Instead he circled around it, and began pawing at a nearby tree trunk. It was old and split, its bark mottled with lichen. Millie crouched beside him. "What is it?" He dug, not at the roots, but at something buried in the crook between root and soil. Then with a soft grunt, he stepped aside. Millie saw a glint. She reached in, fingers brushing something cold, metal. She pulled out a small rusted locket. It opened with a soft snap. Inside was a faded photograph of a young girl with missing teeth, grinning wide, and a tiny dog tag shaped like a heart, inscribed, Abby and Major, forever. Millie's throat tightened. This was real. This was evidence. She slipped the locket into her coat pocket. Good boy, she whispered. Major didn't wag his tail, but he nudged her hand with his nose. Then he sat again, watching, waiting. For what? Millie didn't know what came next, so she returned home. That night, she couldn't sleep. The locket sat under her pillow, heavy with truth. She wanted to scream it from rooftops, to shout, I know what happened to the girl who vanished. But how could she prove it? She needed help, real help, not from grown-ups who thought she was playing detective, but from someone who knew what to do with bones and lost girls and old dogs who never gave up. There was one person, Mr. Whitlock, the retired police officer who lived in the crooked house down the lane. People said he was strange, that he talked to himself, that he never left town after his daughter died. Millie didn't know if any of that was true, but she did know he used to work on missing persons cases, and Abigail was a case. The next morning she marched to his front porch. The paint was peeling, the screen door hung slightly off one hinge, but the porch was clean, cared for. Millie rang the bell. It didn't work. She knocked, and waited. A long silence. Then the door opened. Mr. Whitlock stood in the shadows, tall, grey hair combed neatly. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind. Yes, I found something, Millie said, holding up the locket. She told him everything. Not all at once, because stories like this need time to bloom, but piece by piece, about Major, about the digging, about the bone, about Abigail. Her voice never trembled, not once. Mr. Whitlock listened. When she finished, he held the locket in his hand, silent. Then he turned it over. This was never in evidence, he muttered. He looked at her, long and careful. You're either a very creative child, he said, or this dog just gave us a second chance at justice. He paused. Let's find out which. That evening they returned together. Millie held the flashlight. Mr. Whitlock carried a small spade and a thermos of black coffee. Major met them at the edge of the woods. He didn't growl, just watched, then turned and led the way. They reached the mound. This time, Mr. Whitlock knelt. Mind if I take a look, soldier? He asked the dog. Major stepped aside. The digging was careful, gentle. Millie watched from behind, hands clutched tight, then metal, a small button, child-sized, and beneath that, deeper, fabric, a faded pink hoodie, half-rotted by time, tangled with brittle bone. Mr. Whitlock stopped. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone. This is Whitlock, he said, voice low. I need to report a recovery. Possible remains. Yes, Abigail Hewitt. I think she's been found. Major sat beside the grave and howled. A long mournful cry that echoed through the trees and into every broken piece of the town that had tried to forget. Millie reached for his fur. It's okay, she whispered. They'll remember now. Elmridge changed overnight. The woods once forgotten were now roped off with yellow tape. Police vehicles lined the road beside Grandma Etta's fence, headlights slicing the dusk. Reporters swarmed the town like crows, asking questions, spinning theories, flashing old photographs of a girl with missing teeth and a loyal dog no one had seen in a decade. The grave was confirmed. Dental records, DNA, the pink hoodie. Abigail Rose Hewitt had finally come home. But the town didn't celebrate. There were no banners, no bells, just silence. The kind of silence that comes after a deep long sigh when grief mixes with guilt and no one knows what to say. And Millie watched it all happen from behind her grandmother's lace curtains. She didn't want to be a hero. She just wanted people to see what she saw. That sometimes the answers are right beneath your feet. That sometimes loyalty outlives everything else. Major became a local legend, but not everyone welcomed him. Some feared him, thought he was cursed. A ghost dog, they called him. How could an animal survive out there, alone for 9 years? No one asked Millie, except Mr. Whitlock. He visited often now, bringing warm pastries from the corner bakery and a flask of something that smelled like cinnamon and memory. He and Grandma Etta played chess on the porch, while Millie sat beside Major in the grass. She'll get a proper funeral, Mr. Whitlock said one morning. There's talk of renaming the school library after her. Millie nodded. She liked books, she said. I can tell, Mr. Whitlock smiled. You've got good instincts, kid. The funeral was quiet. Closed casket, though there wasn't much to bury. A pink hoodie, a locket, a photograph. The service was held under an oak tree behind the school, where Abigail had once read to younger kids. Millie stood beside Major, her small hand buried in his thick fur. When the minister asked if anyone wanted to say a few words, it was Mr. Whitlock who stepped forward. She was only 9, he said, voice cracking. But she taught us more than most people do in a lifetime. She taught us that silence can still speak, that loyalty doesn't forget, and that some heroes don't wear badges, they wear collars. Major let out a low whine. Millie squeezed his shoulder. After the service, people came, some to lay flowers, some to apologize, to Abigail, to her memory, to the part of themselves that had tried to move on too quickly. The mayor approached Millie, kneeling to meet her eye. You're very brave, she said. Millie shrugged. I just listened. That night, Elmridge slept a little differently. Windows stayed shut, porch lights stayed on, parents hugged their children tighter. Stories floated through dinner tables, about the girl who vanished, and the dog who never stopped searching. But not all stories were finished, because the locket wasn't the only thing hidden in the woods. It was Major who led her there. 3 days after the funeral, just as the sun dipped behind the pines, Millie noticed the dog waiting outside again, ears perked, tail still. She didn't hesitate. Boots on, flashlight in hand, she followed. But this time they didn't go to the grave. They went deeper, past the clearing, past the broken tree, into a part of the forest where even sound seemed afraid to travel. Major moved quickly, now his limp more determined than impaired. They reached a stream. On the other side stood a rusted trailer, half collapsed, vines curling up its sides. One window shattered, the others fogged with mildew. A forgotten place, unlisted, hidden. Millie's heart pounded. Major growled, not at her, but at the trailer. Someone lived here, Millie whispered. She stepped forward. The door creaked open when she touched it. Inside, the air was thick with mold and rot. Old papers littered the floor, bottles, broken frames, a couch with stuffing clawed out. Major sniffed the corners, growling low. Then he stopped at a drawer, half hanging open. Millie crouched beside him. Inside the drawer were photographs, hundreds of them, children, some playing, some walking home from school, some staring directly at the camera, unaware they were being watched. Millie's skin went cold. She recognized some faces, older now, her own classmates, friends of Grandma Etta's neighbors. Someone had been watching, and not just Abigail, all of them. She took one photo, the one that mattered most, Abigail, sitting on a swing, Major beside her. But in the corner of the photo, half in shadow, was a man, smiling. The next morning, Mr. Whitlock didn't say a word when Millie handed him the photograph. He looked at it for a long time, then he stood. I'll make some calls. Within 24 hours, the trailer was swarmed. Crime scene tape, detectives, evidence vans. They found enough to reopen 7 cold cases. It wasn't just about Abigail anymore. It was about every child the town had forgotten, every name left off the headlines, every whisper that never turned into truth. And Millie had started it, because she listened, because Major remembered. The newspapers came again. This time, they didn't call it folklore, they called it a miracle. But Millie knew better. It wasn't magic, it was morning. The air in Elmridge changed again, not the kind of change that dances with spring or curls into the crispness of fall. No, this change was heavier, dense with the weight of realization, of truth long buried clawing its way into daylight. Millie felt it first in the eyes of the people, at the store, on the street, in church. They didn't look through her anymore. They looked at her, some with awe, some with guilt, some with a strange kind of gratitude that seemed too big to fit in words. But Millie didn't want their thanks. She wanted rest, and Major wanted closure. He was slowing down, not from age, but from the exhaustion of memory, the burden of 9 years walking in silence, howling when no one listened, staying when no one called. Millie saw it in his eyes. He had one last trail to walk. The trial was fast. The man in the photograph, Howard Blackstone, had fled Elmridge the day Abigail vanished. No one had thought much of it at the time, just another quiet bachelor moving on. But now, he was escorted back in shackles. The trailer, the photographs, the DNA traces, it was overwhelming. he confessed, not because of guilt, but because the past had finally cornered him, teeth bared and growling. He followed me, Blackstone said of Major. That dog, every day, I moved the body because of him. I couldn't sleep. The courtroom gasped, but Millie didn't. She already knew. Major never chased justice the way humans do. He simply remembered, and waited, until someone could understand his language. The sentence was life without parole. It still didn't feel like enough, but it was something. A week later, a statue was unveiled in front of Elmridge Elementary. Not of Abigail, of Major. The sculptor had captured his stance perfectly. One paw lifted mid-step, ears alert, eyes locked on something only he could see. At his base, etched in bronze, "Loyalty remembers." Millie stood beside the mayor, the townspeople, her grandmother. Reporters asked for her statement. She kept it simple. "He never gave up," she said, "even when we did." That night, Millie lay awake in her bed, staring at the shadows the moon cast on her ceiling. Major slept at the foot of her bed. His breath was slow, steady, but she knew he had one last place to go. It happened the next morning. Major refused breakfast, not out of illness, but choice. His eyes were clear, focused. He stood by the door, tail low but firm, and looked at Millie. She didn't hesitate. Boots, flashlight, jacket. They walked together, not into the woods, not to the school, but to the old tracks where the train used to run before it was decommissioned 10 years ago. Millie had only ever seen them in photos. The rusted rails curved into a narrow tunnel, carved into a small hill, barely wide enough for a single car. Major stopped at the entrance. He looked at her, then walked inside. Millie followed. The air was damp, cold, the kind of cold that felt ancient. Halfway through, Major stopped. There, beneath a stone, just like before, was a collar, not his. Abigail's first dog, Max, his name barely visible on the tag. Millie picked it up. "Why here?" she whispered, and then she saw it, etched into the stone beside the collar, faded with time. "I miss you, I love you, I'll find you." It was Abigail's handwriting. This is where she'd come the day she vanished, looking for her lost dog. This was where she was taken, and this was where Major had waited, every day, hoping someone would see. He lay down beside the stone, rested his head, and closed his eyes. They buried him there, beside the stone, beside the last piece of the story. A bronze plaque joined the one at the school. He found her, and he found peace. The years passed. Millie grew, moved away, studied law, dedicated her life to helping the voiceless, the forgotten, the ones who couldn't speak for themselves. She told Major's story wherever she went, not because it was hers, but because it belonged to everyone who ever loved and lost, and because some heroes don't ask to be remembered. They just wait until someone's ready to listen.